choosing what show to watch on Netflix, picking a takeaway to order, helping your child decide what they can do to stop being bored. All these things are an absolute nightmare. So using a whiteboard, a fidget spinner and an old takeaway container lid, why don't you make this DIY decision wheel? For this one, I'll also be using offcuts from the balance board project. If you haven't seen that video already, there'll be a link in the description down below. Make sure you check it out. I had a right laugh making that one. The first job is to take the offcut of furniture board and cut it to length. I went for a length of 50 centimetres and this will act as a backboard to the decision wheel. I just used the handsaw to cut it to length, but you could use a jigsaw as well. To make the corners look a lot nicer, I used an old cap and traced round it, and this will give me a mark to cut out with a jigsaw. I could then cut the corners round. So the board can stand up, we're going to cut a couple of triangles. Now I marked these triangles by eye. I just offered the board up at an angle that I thought looked good and made a mark. I could then cut out one of the triangles and use that to trace round to cut out the second one as well. All the pieces get thoroughly sanded to make sure they're nice and smooth and there's no sharp edges left. The triangle supports can then be glued on the bottom of the board. Now to save using anything like screws or clamps, we're going to use a mixture of both wood glue and super glue. The wood glue will give it its strength, but it'll take quite a while to set. So I'm going to use super glue as well. Even though it's not that strong on wood, it'll set really quickly and it'll hold the pieces together while the wood glue dries. With the glue drying, let's turn our attention to the whiteboard. Now I chose to use a whiteboard for this so we can easily change whatever the decisions we need to make on it are. So it could be a takeaway, what show to watch on Netflix, but for this example, we're going to try and make it a bit of a boredom buster. Come up with different activities to try and beat your child's boredom. To mark a circle, I used a screw, a bit of string and a pencil to act a little bit like a compass, but you can just trace around something that's round. I went for a circle that was 35 centimetres in diameter. I could then cut that circle out using a jigsaw. Now the first cut I would recommend to just keep it rough. Get the basic shape roughed out and then you can always come back later and neaten up the edges with a jigsaw as well. Because the whiteboard is so thin, a little bit of sanding will smooth out the edges and it'll get it much closer to the circle, so do keep that in mind. Don't worry about getting a perfect cut straight away. Once you're happy with the circle that you've got, we just need to divide up the circle. I went for 8 separate sections just to keep it simple. A case of drawing a line down the middle, cutting that in half, and in half again, just to make it much easier. Of course you can go with as many segments as you like. Each segment will be a different decision. With the circle divided up, we just need to drill holes on each of the dividing lines. These will receive a little dowel. The little dowels are what will actually click on the wheel, and that's what's going to make the decisions for us. Once the holes were drilled, it's just a case of adding a little dab of super glue onto each of the dowels and hammering them into the holes. So we got the board basically done and we've got the circle basically done. Now we just need to come up with a way to stick them together and to make it spin. And what better thing to use than a fidget spinner? I'm sure if you've got children anyway, there's going to be fidget spinners in drawers all over the house. It was a mad phase a year, maybe even 2 years ago now, so I'm sure you've got one knocking around. We're going to get one, take the caps off and glue them onto the board and onto the circle. All you need to do is remove the caps from the centre of the fidget spinner and then super glue the main body of the fidget spinner to the board. Make sure you centre it as best as you can. Measuring and making a little mark will really help with this. Then taking one of the caps that we removed, we can super glue that to the back of the whiteboard circle. Again, we want to try and get this as centralised as possible. Making marks will help. It hasn't got to be perfect, but the better that you can get it, the better it'll spin and the less biased the wheel will be. I didn't get it perfect by any means, you'll see that in a little while, but it works good enough for me. So we got the wheel spinning nicely on the board. Now we need to add something to act as a stop and a selector on the wheel. So I went ahead and I cut a little block using the jigsaw. I got it sanded so it was smooth, and then I just needed to drill a little hole through the back of the board to enable me to attach it with a screw and some wood glue. With that block in place, we can now think about what we're going to use as the selector itself. Now, I highly recommend using an old takeaway lid. The plastic on one of these lids has got just enough flexibility in it to enable the dowels to pass by, but it will slow the wheel down and make a selection eventually. So you want to cut just a rough pointer shape. There's no real science to this. Cut it, hold it up against the block, spin the wheel, see how it's turning. If you need to cut it a bit thinner, cut it thinner. Just get a feel for it and see what works best. Once you're happy with the shape and how it's actually working on the spinner, it's just a case of attaching it to the block with a screw. A really good thing about using the fidget spinner as a turning mechanism is the fact that you can always pop the whiteboard off to make it easier to write on all the different decisions. Like I say, for this example, we're going for ideas to try and stop the kids being bored. So I just wrote on a selection of different activities that you could do, pop the wheel back on, give it a spin, and then decision made. I really am surprised with how well this actually works. That fidget spinner spins so well. With the selector in place, it makes that really satisfying clicking noise making the decisions. And then of course, once it lands on a segment, that's the decision made. I really hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below letting us know what you struggle to make decisions about. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you click the subscribe button and then click the little bell icon next to it. That way you'll get a notification as soon as we upload a new video. Thank you all for watching.